ahead and call this meeting to order. And Mr. Coley, if you would note that we have all commissioners present except for Commissioner Ward.
So noted.
First thing, item on our agenda is approval of minutes. Do we have a motion and a second for the approval of the February 21st minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor? All in favor, I say aye.
Aye.
Our next official action is consideration of Resolution 1391, appointing Knoxville Utility Board President, Chief Executive Officer Dave Bolus, to serve on the Growth Policy Coordinating Committee for Knox County. Okay?
Yes.
Commissioners, you received some information from me last week about a letter that I got from Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs. He is desiring to reconvene the Growth Policy Coordinating Committee for Knox County. And as part of that, he asked for a designee from KUB to be part of that committee. As you also received, state law requires the governing body of the largest municipally owned utility in Knox County to be a part of that committee, but it requires board action to make that official. So, and Kathy Hamilton and I talked about that, Commissioner Chair Hamilton, and she requested that I be a part of that committee, and so Resolution 1391 makes that an official appointment. Before that, I can answer any questions you may have about that position.
Can you provide us some character references?
Yes. Good question.
Any other questions? All right, then we will need a motion and a second for Resolution 1391. Second, to serve on the Growth Policy Coordinating Committee for Knox County, and this is the first and final reading.
So moved. Second.
Is it 1390 or 1391?
I have 1391. 1391.
Okay,
Must have an old agenda there.
that's all right.
We just wanted to see if you'd catch that.
No problem.
Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this resolution? All right. Then, Mr. Coley, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Askew?
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert?
Aye.
Commissioner Fennell?
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson-Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Small?
Aye.
And Commissioner Ward is not here, so Resolution 1391 is passed.
Thank you very much. Next, we will have the President's report. Janet, you're up again.
Yes. Commissioners, as you know, Project Help has been a long-standing program that we've had here at KUB to help our customers pay their utility bills in the winter season, heating months. We are fortunate to have some visitors with us today that are some guests of that program. And before we get that started, I want to introduce Anna Freshour, one of our counselors, to give you a brief presentation about Project Help and the campaign that was just finished up. She will introduce those folks and recognize their help in this program. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolus, and good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I'm going to give you, provide you with some information about Project Help, an overview of what it does, the results of our most recent campaign, and the impact that it has on our customers. In 1983, CAC and KUB saw a need in our community for a program that provided some heating assistance to our customers, and out of that need, they established Project Help. Project Help does provide heating assistance for low-income families in our community. These families could be going through a crisis, such as a job loss or a medical emergency that requires them to need a little assistance. Project Help doesn't just help on electricity. It helps on wood, oil, propane, whatever that customer's heating source is what Project Help can assist on. Project Help is a nonprofit organization, so donations made are tax deductible. 100% of the donations made come from our customers, our community, and every penny that they donate goes back to the families in need. It's also governed by a community member board. There are 14 members on the board, comprised of KUB, CAC. It also consists of other partners and community volunteers. There are many ways to donate to Project Help. We have our annual campaign every January that lasts for 4 weeks. We also have it to where you can have it as a recurring charge on your bill. There's also many one-time donations. You can Go to KUB.org to make a donation. You can check the back of your bill stub that you would like to donate to Project Help. You can also see us out in the community a few times a year at the Food City Food Show and the Home Builders Association of Greater Knoxville Home Show, where we collect donations. We also promote Project Help and send out information in the KUB Connection, which is the bi-monthly customer newsletter, and we send out bill stuffers several times a year as well. We couldn't do what we do without the partners that we have. He mentioned with Food City and Home Federal, and we're happy to have with us today Emerson Breeden and Betsy James with Food City and Adele Sensing with Home Federal. They're the ones that during the campaign, their employees are asking for the donations. They're the ones that really help us to raise what we raise every year. We also have several media partners. We partner with WIVK, WVLT, and the Knox News. They provide us support and promotion before, during, and after the campaign. They do all of this, the commercials, the advertisements, all free of charge. We could not thank our supporters and partners enough for what they do for us during the campaign. Talking about that campaign, every year we come together. These partnerships lead to successful campaigns every year. We're proud to say that in 2019, the campaign that just wrapped up, we raised just under $50,000. We were so proud of that number. You can see that every year the campaign does fluctuate in how much it raises. It's based off of the weather. It's a campaign, so the customers' willingness to donate every year is how we raise our money. But we are so proud of what we were able to do in 2019. We take that back to the fact that the Food City and the Home Federal employees have really bought into the mission of Project Help, and they're able to convey that to the customers going through their lines. You also might have gone to a Food City during the campaign and saw a 2-liter sitting on the counter. And that 2-liter said if they didn't ask you to donate, then you got to take it home for free. That cashier, if they didn't ask you, then has to ask their manager for a new one. So they want to ask you to donate so that they don't have to talk to their manager for a new one. Project Help really does make a difference in our community. Over the last 5 years, 2,700 families have been assisted with a little over $800,000 in funds. What it does, the interesting thing of this is that even though this fluctuates every year, it fluctuates based off of the need, it fluctuates based off other assistance that may be available, and it also depends on the weather. If you think back to 2014, as you can see that the amount that was used was a lot higher. That was the year of the polar vortex. It was really cold, so Project Help was able to step in and assist more people. 2015 was a little milder of a year, so the numbers were a little lower. But over those 5 years, the average per household has stayed relatively the same, between $290 and $310 per household. I'll also note that I mentioned how much we raise through the campaign every year, but we're spending more than that. All of those other ways we talked about that you can donate to Project Help, we bring in an average of $120,000 in donations just through those other avenues. And we're able to send every penny back to assist our families. All of this to say that Project Help really does make a difference. It's making a difference in individual lives as well. These are a couple examples of some families that have been assisted through Project Help. The first family was a mom and a dad with a young son. The dad was active duty military and he was shot in the chest. And when he returned home due to his health, he wasn't able to work. Project Help was able to step in while he was waiting his benefits to start up and assist him on their bill and keep them warm that winter. The second family was a mom and a dad with 2 young children. The dad was diagnosed with cancer and he passed away. And while the mom was dealing with his passing and now raising 2 children on her own and having to take over the bills, Project Help was able to step in. And you can see that neither of these families could give enough thanks for what Project Help did. And that's true of all of the families that receive Project Help. And to take it from their own words, Project Help really does make the community a better place. Thank you for letting me present to you today. Do you have any questions?
How does this project interact with Rounded Up money?
It is separate funding, so the Rounded Up is the weatherization, and then Project Help just pays your bill 1 month.
Do they get the people asking for assistance, do they automatically get referred, I imagine they get information about Roundup as well to help, you know, if it's due to, you know, something else.
CAC, if they saw that they needed to possibly get some weatherization on their house, they would refer them to that program.
Okay. Is there a cap to assistance?
The maximum amount you can get is $400.
In terms of need, are there any unmet needs in terms of project help sometimes? Or do you try to spread it out so that everybody can get some assistance needs it?
I think that it's spread out in a way that everybody who needs assistance can get it. I think it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and we keep getting the donations in order to do that. And I think that it's telling in the average that even though the average is 400, or the max is 400, it's less, it's more around 3. So we're spreading it a little further that way to help as many families as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I bring your next speaker, I do want to say a special thanks to our friends from Food City and Home Federal, Emerson, Betsy, Adele. Thank you to your folks. I shop at Food City and I got hit up every time by the cashier. In a very nice way. It was very pleasant. But it really, you know, those dollars, every little dollar helps and helps those folks that need it the most. And it's our customers that give. And so thank you for what you do every year. It's been a long-standing relationship with you folks, and we're going to keep it going for years to come. So thank you very much.
We're glad to be a part of it.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I'd like to recognize Mike Boland, Vice President of Utility Advancement, to give you an update on EVs, electric vehicles. We have been involved in that quite a bit, and wanted to give you an update on what's going on in the market.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. I want to start out talking about EVs. I'm going to start out by talking about emissions. You know, if you are my age, when you grew up thinking about greenhouse gases, you grew up thinking about power plants and emissions from power plants. And what we need to do to clean our air was to go after the electricity producing sector. But the reality is that if you look at, according to the EPA, looking at all the sectors of the economy, transportation is one of the larger emitting sectors that I wasn't aware of, and I doubt many of you were aware of as well. And if you look at the electricity sector, a lot of progress has been made there. You know, recently TVA announced they were going to close 2 more of their coal-fired plants, one of Bull Run over Oak Ridge, one Paradise up in Kentucky. And when they're done with that, TVA will only have 4 coal-burning plants left in their whole fleet. They've been transitioning more to enhancements to the hydro generation. They've had enhancements to their nuclear generation. They've added a number of gas-fired units. They've more recently added some utility-scale solar installations in the western part of the state and North Alabama. So the electricity sector is making a lot of strides. I'm not saying they are where they're going to be, but they made a lot of strides. I think a lot of attention is turning to a more broader scale look at where are all the emissions coming from and what can be done about it. So as we talk about transportation, you can see that, again, it's one of the largest contributors, and there's a graphic there showing what happens with just 1 gallon of gas, how it contributes to greenhouse gas emissions as well. EVs reduce emissions. If it's 100% EV, you can reduce, as you see up there, 4 to 6 tons of CO2 emissions per year just from one vehicle. And that's equivalent to planting 2,000 trees for one vehicle. So EVs is one of the venues of which people are looking at to reduce emissions associated with the transportation sector. At the same time, EVs are less expensive to operate. Fuel costs about 60% less, and when I did my back of the envelope calculations, given our rates and the current gas prices, is about $650 a year cheaper than fueling your car with gasoline. So there's economics associated that gives EVs an advantage over traditional gasoline vehicles. There's no oil changes because you don't have an engine. The brakes last for a long, long time because the brakes are actually used to regenerate electricity, so the brakes really don't have wear associated with it the way us shade tree mechanics are used to deal with it. So it's just a whole different type of system. So collectively, we've got a problem with emissions. We know that the transportation sector is a big part of that. We know that electric vehicles reduce those emissions, and we know electric vehicles are cheaper to operate. So that's the framework at which we're going to talk a little bit more. Given that all together, unless you've been out of the country and where you can't get the internet or the newspaper, you know that automakers are now switching to where their intention is, and their stated goals going forward is to produce more and more electric vehicles. Different statements to every single automaker out there. The future looks like the industry is headed toward electric vehicles. And in fact, in the state of Tennessee, you may recall last couple of months, the VW announced that they were going to invest $800 million in the Chattanooga plant to start building a all-electric EV SUV down in Chattanooga. And that will have 2 all-electric vehicles being produced in the state of Tennessee, one the Nissan Leaf, and 2 the new SUV by VW down in Chattanooga. So even within our state, EVs will be leading the pack as far as generation, as far as production. With that said, EV sales going forward in time are expected to climb. Some people have said it may take off like the smartphones did, where everybody had a phone. If you look at the growth of smartphones, it just sort of went vertical almost. This is a more conservative look, I think, of all the ones out there, but nonetheless, a very, very rapid growth in EV adoption is predicted going forward in time. KUB has been adopting EVs as well over time. Currently, we have 24 vehicles in our fleet. They range from an all-electric Nissan Leaf on your far left there to a hybrid electric vehicle similar to a Nissan Leaf, but the second from the right, the Ford Escape there, is a different type of technology, electric vehicle. The bucket trucks in the back, those are plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. The batteries that are plugged in and charged overnight are used to run the booms on those vehicles. The vehicles don't have to be idling while they're working. So a lot of different technologies, but we've been adopting EVs as the industry has started to mature. Also, over the course of the past year, KUB has been participating with a number of organizations around the state and looking at and trying to adopt ways that would incentivize the continued adoption of EVs. All of the parties have an interest in seeing EVs adopted and have come together to strategize and to make sure that we were all heading in the same direction instead of everybody doing something different on making sure that EVs are adopted going forward. I talked off the wrong slide, I'm sorry. But when I talk about EVs, the EVs and the EV, I don't know, train of thought here. EVs and the adoption of EVs are consistent with our blueprint. If you look at our blueprint, we're supposed to be stewards of the economy, customer resources, and to enhance the value of our community. And EVs hits all those buttons. EVs enhances the environment, we talked about that earlier. EVs helps maintain affordable rates. If one customer, one residential customer adopts an EV as 100% EV, their usage may increase as much as 400 or 500 kWh on an average usage of, say, 1,100 kWh. 11,000 kWh over a year, so a almost fairly significant increase. And by the significant increase by that, one customer, it helps reduce and maintain the rates affordability for everybody. And as that customer then no longer has savings for the use of the EV, it allows him to use that money that he saved to reinvest in the economy. So it increases the economic viability of the whole neighborhood. So it's a win-win-win for customers that don't have EVs, for customers that do have EVs, and a win for the whole community as well. So I got ahead by one slide. I should have just gone ahead into it. But KUB has been a participant for the past year in this effort. And this effort across the state has tried to draw us all together with a lot of common themes. Coming out of this effort this past January, there was 4 commonalities of areas of emphasis that were developed. The first was just EV awareness, just an awareness of EVs. There's a lot of the community that have never driven one. There's a lot of the community don't really know a whole lot about EVs, and so just gathering awareness for EVs is one of the main challenges. Some of the ways that might be addressed is having information on websites like we have placed and TVA has as well. Another one is having what they call EV ride share deals, where you can go and drive and test drive an EV. The East Tennessee Clean Fuels Coalition offers that, and that's one of the ways that occurs. The second area of emphasis is EV availability. If you were to go around to most of your dealerships here today in the Knoxville area, it'd be difficult to find an EV. It's in the press a lot, but a lot of the EVs that are being produced right now head out to the West Coast, where there are tax incentives by the state government for people to adopt them. So it's more difficult to find the EVs here. So we're trying to strategize on how to make them more available just for the general public to even find around here. The third area is in policies. The policies could be a policy associated with new house building that could be adopted, such that the new house code, building code, could include a 220 circuit in your garage, so that if you later adopted an EV, the charging infrastructure necessary for that would already be existing in the house that you build. The policy could be, if a new construction of a business was in place, depending on the number of parking places associated with that business, there might be a dedicated, a requirement of a dedicated number of 220 circuits or 240 volt EV chargers as well. The policies could be a policy associated with offering a time and use rate schedule as well. There's a lot of different policies that could be adopted in order to help enhance the adoption of EVs. The fourth category is charging infrastructure. Public needs to know that there are charging infrastructure out and about, so that they can not worry about how are they going to maintain the charge in their EVs. Which brings up the whole idea of range anxiety. You know, anybody who's thought about an EV, they worry about, oh gosh, am I going to be able to get to where I need to go? That's just a common, everybody's going to think that as well. And the reality is, if we just sit there and think, or if I sit there and think, on a given week, I'll drive to work and back, and I'll drive to the gym, or I'll drive to the grocery store, or the movie, whatever. But my trips collectively are very small trips. And you know, I'd say I average 250 miles a week, or something like that in my vehicle, and each trip is very, very small. And so, you know, the reality is that if I keep, you know, I don't drive much more than 30 miles at a time, I don't think, and most people don't either. But even given that fact, all of us react to thinking, gosh, you know, I'm be worried about running out of power when I was on the interstate in a traffic jam. You know, I mean, that's a common phenomenon that we all have here. So the charging, public charging infrastructure is an issue that has to be addressed by the industry in order to encourage the adoption of EVs. At KUB, this past year, we looked at and investigated as one of our corporate initiatives the possibility of adding a fast charge EV station to our system, given that there wasn't one in the community. When we investigated, the idea was we were going to put that down at the CNG public fueling station. There was already a parking area there. There was already the infrastructure there. And all we were going to do was add a DC fast charge station there. At the end of the day, we didn't do that, and I'll talk a little bit more why in a moment. But we've been thinking about this as a corporation now for more than a year of how to help our community in that regard. But there are three different kinds of EV chargers. The first kind of EV charger is called a level 1 charger. That's the kind of charger that would come with your vehicle. Okay, they just give that to you when you buy a vehicle. That kind of charger, you just plug it into an outlet. Well, there's several outlets around here. You just plug into that outlet, then into your car, and it'll charge your car. But it charges your car very slowly. Okay, that's to some extent most people wouldn't use that. If you really had an EV, you probably want to have what's called a level 2 charger. A level 2 charger is on a 240-volt circuit, which is similar to the kind of circuit you have for your dryer. Okay, most people don't have that in their garage now, so you'd have to go to the expense of having that installed. But if you had an EV, that's likely the type of EV charger you would have. The EV chargers you see around at the public parking garages, or you see around at different locations around the town here, those are all level 2 chargers. And that's the standard kind of charger you might see. Even that kind of charger, though, takes some level of time, some amount of time to charge a car. So for people that are making trips, like if I was going to drive from here to Nashville or from here to Memphis, for example, you'd have to be very religious about stopping and recharging your car periodically if you're on a level 2 charger. It might make your trip fairly long. And another kind of charger is called a DC fast charger, and that charger can refill your car in 30 to 40 minutes. Still not like as fast as gasoline, but that's the fastest that's available right now. DC fast chargers are what you would use if you're going to do a cross-country trip, go down to Destin. You'd be looking for DC fast chargers along the way with the idea that wherever you stop, you'd be in a position to maybe eat or take a little break in your trip while you refilled your EV vehicle. That's the type of station that we looked at installing on our system. At the end of the day, because our site at the CNG station really doesn't have facilities for people to be there for that period of time, combined with one other thing, an EV fast charge station is now under construction on our system. This station is in the parking lot between the Walmart and Sam's out at Walbrook Drive, if you know where that's at. It's right in the middle of the parking lot there. This is DC fast charge station. You see it's got 4 charging locations right there. It's not been activated just yet, but it looks like it's almost complete. This charging station is being installed by Electrify America. Electrify America is a corporation that was established coming out of the VW diesel settlement funds, and they are building stations like this at intervals across the interstate network throughout the United States, so that people will have the ability and the confidence that they can travel with EVs around the nation. So the combination of our site not being so conducive to a long-term person's waiting while the car is charged, as well as now there is an alternative and Knoxville here, led us to counsel that idea and maybe have some other ideas on how we can help contribute to the incentiveness of EVs. So, what are we looking at? Well, for one thing, we're looking at the potential of offering time of use rates. Time of use rates does a couple of things. First of all, it helps the attractiveness of the rates for charging EVs. You're already saving money in operation costs in EVs, but we can even incent that further if they charge when we are not peaking. If they charge off peak, it costs us less to provide the power. We can give those savings through to the customer. The second thing that we're looking at is the possibility of EV charger rebates. There was a gentleman here last board meeting that actually brought that idea up, and I think Mr. Bowles may have said at the time that he would be a little bit ahead of his time because we were already planning to make this presentation today. So EV charger rebates is something that we're considering. As we sell more to our customers associated with EV charging at their house, there's an economic benefit to us that we might can then turn around and use it as a form of rebate to customers. So that's another thing we're looking at. When we had this consortium of people looking at the adoption of EVs, it is easy to come up with ways on problems that there might be with adoption of EVs. For example, most people buy used cars, not new cars, and there isn't an EV used car market right now, okay? Most people, if they have two vehicles in this state, second vehicle is a truck. You know, there aren't so many EV trucks out there just yet. That's a whole segment of the market that's missing. The salespeople in the car dealerships that sells cars, truthfully, they don't know a lot about EVs, and they won't sell what they know, right? So you have that issue. But so you can go down a whole litany of things that would argue that I'm not sure this is going to happen, almost. But one of the things that we need to be aware of is things can happen really fast. You know, I mean, whether or not we believe it, things can really happen fast. And I'll tell you, between the emissions that come from the transportation section, the beneficial non-emissions of electric vehicles, the operating cost savings associated with electric vehicles, the fact that the manufacturers themselves are now in the mode of promoting and building electric vehicles as opposed to building gas vehicles. I think we're going to see this happen. We're trying to position ourselves to be part of that effort, to promote that transition to electric vehicles, and we're looking for ways and to accommodate that along with the other statewide partners we're working with. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions other than why did I look to see which slide I was talking about.
So a couple questions. So in terms of EV, are there any goals in terms of our new fleet that we replace old vehicles to have a certain percentage or amount of EV vehicles in our fleet?
We answer that, Susan, or can we answer that? We don't have goals for EVs, we do have goals for alternative vehicles.
Okay.
So like CNG is a big part of our fleet, CNG. So we do look at alternative fuel vehicles and try to have some goals to shoot for that. So as we retire other vehicles, if there's an alternative fuel out there, we try to purchase that.
Okay. And you answered my next question. I was going to ask about CNG. How's that working in terms of serving the community, but also meeting our needs?
Actually, we've had CNGs for almost 30, 40 years. They work really, really well. The hardest part is finding people that make those type of vehicles, just like EVs. They'll dabble in it for a while and maybe get out of it and then get back in. And so if the market really dictates to us what we can buy or not buy, we're always looking for that choice if we can. I've driven CNG vehicles at KUB for years and they work great, but like I said, just finding the Fords and the Chevrolets and the Dodges that are made that way is a challenge sometimes.
Mike, one other thing that I hear about concerns about electric vehicles is related to batteries. You know, what happens, you know, how good is the battery life? How do we dispose of a battery? What, you know, how do you deal with that whole thing? Have we had any EVs at KUB where batteries have been an issue? And if so, how have you all handled that?
The industry talks about the life of the batteries. The batteries, if you were to buy an EV today, the battery's warranted for 8 years. A lot of the EV manufacturers would say that's generally the life of a car. But to answer your question specifically, a lot of the vehicles we adopted early on, like the battery bucket trucks, those type vehicles, they were kind of first of a kind. I'm not going to say we didn't have issues, but it wasn't because of batteries. It was a little bit about, okay, when the battery gets low, the engine's got to turn on to now power the boom. A lot of electronic stuff there had to go through, but it wasn't batteries per se. Now, the recycling of batteries or the reuse of batteries, even when a battery gets less than ideal charging or recharging capability, it still has the ability to maintain some level of charge. It just may not serve the vehicle's purpose. I know Oak Ridge National Labs and several other labs are looking at, okay, is there a way we can reuse these used batteries in a different application? One of the applications that they're looking at is taking those batteries and using them either in substations or other locations to be peak shaving devices where you're not using them all the time, but when you need it on a really hot day, you have that battery device there that can shave peaks. So people are looking at that issue. So I didn't list all the issues that were that need to be overcome that people have talked about. It's just such an exciting possibility out there. So that I think with the ingenuity of everybody involved and the economic incentives and the environmental incentives, all that's really going to drive people to change their habits.
I think you're a wealth of information. Every presenter is a wealth of information, but I think you're exceptionally wealthy as far as what you know and the depth of your knowledge. I have a question about just looking at this slide where it's, you know, clearly the vehicle took over very, very rapidly. So if the electric vehicles took over rapidly, what is, say, all the city of Knoxville, everybody's driving an electric vehicle, what does that mean for power generation? How much power are we talking about? Is it the same as what Jordan needs? Is it the same? Is it a huge volume?
Well, if you think about the level 2 charger I talked about, which is the typical charger you'd have in your garage, you'd have installed in your garage if you owned an EV, that's about equivalent to a water heater size load. So it's like everybody adding another water heater to some extent, just to make it, you know, it's kind of scalable. You know, what's going on in our world right now is that the electric demand is actually declining. And this is one of the few spots at which there might be an actual increase in electric demand. Depending on the time in those two, you may not see any overall change in our sales volumes as utility or as far as our infrastructure is concerned at all.
So the more powerful charging station, which is the level 3,
Yes.
what is that comparable to?
Oh, the level 3 are still being ramped up, and some of them, they're trying to get those to charge your car as fast as a gas tank. That's the goal. That's their gold
I don't think I would want to
standard.
wait 40 minutes in line to other
Yeah,
people.
yeah, that's right.
With
So-
kids.
So in order to get to that gold standard where they're going to charge your car that quick, you're looking at electrical requirements consistent with a fairly large grocery store in power in order to deliver that fast of a recharge. The cables that you'd be plugging into your car would probably be liquid cooled because it's generating so much heat because it's charging so fast. That sort of technology is where they're headed, and there's a lot of discussion about that. There are the DC fast chargers, but they could be even faster than the technology is evolving. So I don't know how quick you'll get to where it's just as fast as a gas station, but that's obviously where everybody's trying to land.
which is a much heavier energy load than, you know, the charger we have out there.
It is a much more peaky load for sure.
How much does a level 2 cost?
A level 2, if you were to, say you just bought one and you didn't already have a 240 outlet in your garage, you don't already, if your dryer wasn't in your garage and you didn't have one in your breaker panel, it costs about $1,500 between the installation of the electrician to run the stuff, plus the cost of the charger itself is somewhere around $1,500. Now, truth of the matter is, you ought to ask Mr. Bolus, because he did it. Now, he has a little bit of an advantage because he's an electrical engineer, and he probably is comfortable to run his own wire and doing his own stuff. So how much did it cost you?
The unit itself costs about $500, just to buy the unit on your wall. So, yeah, it's not cheap.
Yeah, but I haven't been playing here. I've been looking at EV cars.
Shopping.
Yes.
But, I mean, you know, you can get a BMW, for, you know, $35,000 or whatever here it is. A BMW it's 45 for BMW, that's, you know, that's not that expensive. You add $1,500 to the cost. And you make it up. I mean, I've got friends who drive Teslas right now, and they're making up a big part of their car payment by how much they're saving in gas. So, I mean, you gotta look at the whole package. It's a lot
And
more.
there's a $7,500 rebate tax credit to go
Yeah.
with that. So
Yeah.
that helps it as well.
I had to say that because I didn't want anybody to think I was doing words with brains.
He's gonna order it, I think, before.
Yeah.
Nissan Leaf's 30,000.
And have Amazon delivered out front.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did y'all notice, just as an aside, how extraordinary our staff is, how well educated and, I mean, look at our last two speakers and what their credentials are. It's pretty doggone impressive.
Commissioners, as you know, this last month, or actually last 2 months, have seen record rainfall and had an impact on our water and utilities. I've asked Darrell Haygood, Senior Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, to give you an update on that impact to our utilities and some details about it.
Commissioner Askew, I'm here to let you down. And also, if you do get a vehicle, make sure it's at high grounds.
Yeah.
As you are well aware, we've had some rain of late, right? In fact, that rain has been persistent. It's been for a long period of time. It's been a lot of rain. It actually started in 2018. This rainfall event and the saturation of the ground. We had the 4th wettest rainfall in history in our area. And then come on top of that, we have 21 inches of rain in 2019. That's unheard of. And then that culminated the whole event was the 5-inch rainfall event we had on February the 23rd, that weekend. That's when the real flooding occurred. But the ground was primed for the flooding because of saturated ground falls before we had that rainfall event, right? So as you can see over the right, that's Chihuahua Park. You knew the zoo got flooded and those kind of things. So that, you know, this was just a typical picture of all over the region. And the whole region got impacted. It wasn't just Knoxville. It impacted the ditches and the streams and the lakes and the creeks. It impacted the roadways and the utility infrastructures. So it was a region-wide event. And so today, I'm going to talk to you about the impact it had on KUB's infrastructure. And I'm going to start by talking about the impact to the least impacted utility and then work towards the most impacted. With the gas system, we actually had a handful of meters that were submerged because of houses and where they were located, so we replaced gas meters. We also, after the rain subsided, we went and inspected their bridge crossings for our gas pipes to make sure they were okay. Everything was fine, but we had 5 bridge crossings where we had pictures like this. We had to remove debris, but no gas leaks, and it worked out fine. So that was it for the gas system. Water system, believe it or not, performed extremely well. And no surprise on the drinking water quality issues, no issues. But I will say that the amount of rain that you get, anybody see the river, how muddy it actually got? Well, there were a 3-day period of time where it got just immensely muddy, the 5-inch rain day in February 23rd. We doubled the amount of coagulant that we use, and what that does is just help clean the water. That's worth $25,000 worth of additional coagulant in a 3-day period of time, just to clean the water. So our impact was really just more coagulant. And I'm proud to say we didn't have an increase in main breaks throughout that whole process. Our next system, as you know, we had some power outages. We had nearly 23,000 power outages at one time. And one thing that's unique about this storm, we had to figure out a way to get to the places to restore power. If anybody had to get out during that weekend, you kept running into roads that were closed. There were over 100 road closed in the city of Knoxville alone. And of course, as you know, we go beyond the city of Knoxville. So that took us a little bit of creativity to get to the spots and to restore power. But the folks did a great job. On Monday of this week, we found out we had a sinkhole that was beginning to show its to surface. And it happened to be at our Cherokee Trail pump station, or substation. And as a result, we partially switched it out of service. It's near the UT hospital. No customers are impacted, no customers are out of service. And right now, as we speak, we're evaluating the extent of the sinkhole and what the remediation needs might need to be. So we're still looking at that one. Mr. Bolton had spot the horse. So I had to copy, can you spot a manhole? In these pictures. You know, these areas are not normally covered with water, right? They're Third Creek Greenway, the Fountain City area. But we have manholes and we have sewer lines. And this is just a couple of pictures of what we saw throughout our entire system. As you know, our wastewater facilities are underwater, or in low-lying areas, which caused them to be underwater. It's along the creeks and the ditches because it's gravity systems, right? So as a result, you can see the photo to the right, our Chapman Highway pump station. That's one of 3 pump stations that was submerged because of the floodwaters. We had 53 wet weather sanitary sewer overflows in February. To put that in perspective, the last 3 years total combined wet weather overflows was roughly equivalent to the one February month that we had here. So this was just a monumental event in the history of the wastewater system. I'll also mention, we've talked about the tanks many times. We have 6 storage tanks, and they hold a capacity of 34 million gallons. In 2003, just before the consent decree, in a typical year, our tanks would maybe fill up 3 times a year. This year alone, already it's been filled up 14 times. So that's the magnitude of what we saw. It also had an impact on the wastewater treatment facilities. As you can see, we've got the number 2 and number 3 records of production of flow at our wastewater plants when they're all combined. And we also had 25 total permit violations when you combine all the plants together. Now, I would like to put that into perspective as well. If you look at pre-consent decree 2003, the chart at the bottom, 47 permit violations occurred with 12 inches of rain. This year, in February, we had about half of those violations, and we had 13 inches of rain. But I would say on top of that, the ground has been completely saturated for so much time, even before this rainfall event. So to put it in perspective, we see that as success, although this was a tremendous event for our wastewater system. Just to remind you, we're continuing to invest 25 miles of sewer rehabilitation on an annual basis. To date, since the consent decree, we've got nearly 30% of our system that's actually renewed. We spent nearly $600 million on the renewal of our system, and we continue, as you know, as we go through the board presentations that we talk about, our budget presentations, we continue to invest and evaluate and prioritize the needs for our wastewater system. I want to back up about the consent decree just to remind you, in general, there was kind of 4 goals associated with the consent decree. Increase the pace of improvements that we were making prior to the consent decree, to reduce overflows, to improve our treatment processes at Kauai and at Fourth Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant, and then finally to have a sustainable programs in place that once the consent decree is over, we're still successful. We kind of had, we had an actual Environmental Protection Agency audit, review, et cetera, at the very end of November 28th. They came on site, actually spent a couple of days, I think, And the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation came with them. They did a full review, they did field visits, they did paperwork, they looked at everything. And kind of a report card is right here in this comment. If you'll see, they indicated that we've made tremendous progress. And I also mentioned that they said they recommend continuing implementation of the plan. So at the end of November, they still felt comfortable with the programs and the progress that we've made. So February 23rd did occur. We had a lot of folks that came to help us out. In fact, we had a little celebration event for those folks because they spent their time with us instead of with their families. Those are the groups, the departments basically were represented, and they put in over 2,600 hours of overtime just during that particular February 23rd, 3-day weekend-ish time frame. And there's another one of our pump stations underwater. So in result, I think you've heard the state of Tennessee has declared an emergency. We think we're somewhere about $500,000 worth of impact to our facilities. That includes labor. FEMA's still assessing it. And quite honestly, most of our systems are pretty much back to normal. We're still doing a few things with the caveat of the substation that we still need to figure out the sinkhole situation. We're still assessing. And I'll close by just showing you a few quotes. These are from our regulators and from the city of Knoxville, EPA, TDEC, and the city of Knoxville. And this was during these storm events that were going on. There was a lot of dialogue between KUB and these entities. And as you can see, they recognize this was an extremely unusual rain event. And as well, I just want to point out the city of Knoxville, Mr. Hagerman, sent this an email, which included the email was sent to EPA and TDEC, and stated KUB has aggressively and effectively responded. So I think that speaks well for them understanding the issues that we were faced with and what we did to try and take care of that business. You got to answer any questions you might have.
Well, mine was, I think, maybe answered with the EPA comment. So as far as the regulators are concerned, when they review this, is it put in a different category and not accounted for since this was a state of emergency?
They will not be definitive of their answer, but they will say that they do respect and understand the certain rain events, and they take that into consideration.
Was this over a 500-year storm? What was there a...
You'll hear some other things, but basically the city of Knoxville said that we had a 100-year flood event in some areas it's 50, some areas it's 25-year flood event.
Okay.
So really, it varied depending on what area of Knoxville you were in. But for example, it's a 1% chance. 100-year flood is a 1% chance of occurrence.
Oh, okay.
In some areas of Knoxville, that did occur.
I just want to say I appreciate the efforts of the 2,600 man. I mean, that's incredible that you can depend on that. It's amazing.
I also want to say thank you for teaching me a new word because I had to look it up. Turbidity.
Oh, excellent. I hate Mr. Wharton, the Commissioner Wharton's not here. I use the word population.
I know, that's the favorite word.
Turbidity means how cloudy the water is.
I know, I
right?
had to look it up and it has actually a picture, so
Great.
I've learned something new today.
I'm interested in the mechanics of what happens when the wastewater systems get flooded. Part of it seems like common sense. You got open top things when they get flooded. The wastewater, including the solids and everything else, flowed out. Is that the first thing?
Yeah, well, one thing I want to make sure, if you're talking about sanitary sewer overflows,
Yeah.
I think that's probably what you're
that's what
referring
I'm
to.
talking
But honestly, there's a lot of dilution.
about.
Okay, so let's make sure that's clear. There are, it's still wastewater, but it's a very diluted type of wastewater. We have to monitor those manholes. Sometimes they're in the street. Sometimes the manhole lids get popped off. We barricade. We put trucks around it. We put trucks on top of it.
Mhm.
We have people going all over the place looking proactively for potential SSOs. And then we address them and we keep an eye on them. When they subside, we immediately clean and disinfect.
Mhm. Well, I'm, SSOs.
Sanitary sewer overflows.
Okay. So part of it is it's just overwhelmed with water that's pushing water up. The second question is, I noticed we depend on electricity. So is that flooded picture you had there, look, does it short out our motors? Does it short out things that make it impossible for us to move the sewer through?
At times, that is the case, and a couple of these occasions that did take place, and we even have backup generator at these locations, and at a couple of those, the backup generators had to be pulled.
Okay, and then third, Gabe sent me a text in the middle of all of this because I sent one to him. I think it's important for the public to know that even when it gets overflowed, what we're putting back in the river is still relatively clean. It's not like nothing. It's not just raw sewage going back into the river. I think that's what, in your mind's eye, when you talk about everything getting pushed up because of water, you think that it's just pure sewage going back into the river. That's really not true. It may not be as clean as it would be under normal circumstances, but it's really dosed heavily with all the things we needed.
We mentioned we had 25 wastewater plant violations.
Uh-huh.
Some of those violations, for example, it's really intended to be for a dry weather condition, the way you monitor it, because in a rainfall, it looks for percent solids reduction from the beginning to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So on a normal day, you get a lot of solids, and you get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
In a rainfall event, there's not much solids coming in. It's so diluted.
Okay.
It goes out about the same dilution rate. Violation, even though
Yeah.
we did our job.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I appreciate the note, but I think that's what we really always need to be reassuring the public, especially in light of what led to the consent decree, which was raw sewage in big yards.
Thank you, Derwin. Commissioners, I want to make an announcement about our meeting for next month, because we're on a different schedule. As you know, in 2017, we reaffirmed our long-term commitment to funding Century 2, and at that time, we adopted 3 years of rate increases through fiscal year 2020. So this year's budget process does not include consideration of any new rate increases. Our April financial session will focus on the details of the fiscal 2020 budget. And we will begin in April with a brief business meeting that begins at 10 a.m. Public comments will be welcome at that meeting before the meeting itself is adjourned. Then following the adjournment and the conclusion of the business meeting, we will begin the fiscal year 20 budget workshop that will include information about systems projects in the upcoming year, and that section is expected to conclude around noon. So everyone make sure you have that on your calendar for next month. All right, we will now hear from members of the public who would like to address the board. Our procedures allow our guests to have up to 5 minutes to make your comments. When there is 1 minute remaining, the yellow light on the podium timer will go on to give you a heads up about your time. And then when your time is up, the red light will go on. The first individual that we have signed up to speak is William Isom. And as he is going to the podium, I'll tell everyone he had a handout for you that you have, you already have at your place. So, Mr. Isom?
Yeah, and Daniel Buchanan's here. He's going to talk more about the survey, the report that I gave you guys. I just want to let you kind of give some context for this. We circulated the petition signatures that we gave you guys last month and the letters of support from neighborhood organizations. But this survey was just to kind of provide a general snapshot of what the connectivity issues are like within the KUB footprint. There's only a couple of hundred respondents on here, but we took the information, even paper surveys, to libraries in rural areas, Torrington, Blaine, Luttrell, Maynardville, Washburn, and also put some advertisements in the Union County newspaper and Granger County Today to try to get some of that information from those communities. But within Knoxville City, there was some of the greatest responses were from 37917 and 37914. So I'll let Daniel kind of tell you more about it, and I'm not going to take up a bunch of time. This seems like a nice short meeting. Our contact information is on the back of the apparatus, so yeah, this is just kind of encourage you guys to look at it and give you some information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Daniel Buchanan.
Good afternoon, wonderful members of the Knoxville Utility Board, commissioners and chair people. I appreciate you all giving me an opportunity to speak to you all today. So a little background about me. I'm a Knoxville citizen. You may or may not be able to tell by my accent, but I've lived here my whole life, 38 years. I've also got a business here, and my business is I provide IT services to small businesses and also to residents in Knoxville. So I work with a lot of residents and small business owners. And one of the things I realized early on that a huge problem exists with internet connectivity here. The options that we have in certain areas are minimal. Sometimes there's no options. Sometimes it's a monopoly. So you end up usually dealing with either AT&T or Comcast. And I don't know if any of you all have ever had to call those entities, but you know how much fun that can be. So actually, I apologize for my tardiness today. I was at a client's called Comcast, and of course it was our fault. We had changed something. We didn't change anything. But anyways, we got it going, so apologize for that. So one of the things early on I wanted to do was just try to establish some sort of leadership in this area as far as to trying to corral people behind me and see what people wanted. And so one of the things I kept coming back to from people a lot smarter than me, and engineers and technicians a lot smarter than me, was that Knoxville needed some sort of a fiber internet connection that was ubiquitous, that was rolled out to everybody and that gave us access. And so some of us may be aware of Chattanooga's efforts in those areas and how much success they've had with that, attracting new businesses and new remote workers that are able to work from down there. So I started a Facebook page a long time ago called Fiber Internet in Knoxville Now, and I just tried to get people interested in it, get people into it, and see what we could do. And so we sort of morphed into an organization called KNOX-FI. It's just a loose affiliation of people. We're all volunteering. We don't have any sort of corporate backing or anything, but my main want for that group is to somehow get a fiber internet option in Knoxville. I think that'd be really nice. And more specifically, I think it'd be nice to have a public fiber internet option in Knoxville, or at least in partnership with the utility board. I think you all have the resources that would be necessary as far as to going out and being able to help put wires up and the big wires and things. You already have the equipment. I'm sure a lot of the equipment may not be being used all the time, so I wanted to, before we get to all that, just at least request that there might be a feasibility study done to just see if this can even work, see what it would cost, see how we would pay for it, how fast we could get a return on our investment. I know that you all run as a nonprofit, so it's not like you just have money to throw at stuff, so I totally understand that. But so we did a study. We've been working with a friend of mine, Eric Ogle, who has a company. He lives down the road from me. His kids go to school with mine out at Shannondale. And he does internet feasibility studies. He works with a company out of Colorado, and I can get you that contact information. And that's what they do. And so I met him within the last 6 months and started talking to him. And he has actually shared with us, he lives in Knoxville, but he does most of this work in surrounding counties and surrounding states. And he actually gave us some of his questions in his surveys. And so this is what we've used as the basis for the survey that we've given you. So. But however, we weren't able to get a really good response. I think that we could get a better response if you all could, maybe put a little flyer in on one of everybody's utility bills or something like that, just a little blurb if you think anything about this. But I really think it'd be a good way to hear from the, I guess kind of the customers, the people who pay for their utilities every month, and just to find out, how much would this cost, and would it be worthwhile to do it? So I've got about a minute left. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Have you all thought about that? I'm aware of the white paper, haven't read the white paper, but yes, sir. So if you all have any questions, our contact information is on the back, email address. So thank you all so much for letting me speak to you today. Yes, sir.
I don't have a question so much as just a comment. I appreciate what you're doing. I'm not entirely sure that we need to add a fifth utility, particularly when there's ample capacity for our current providers to do it if they wanted to. But I'll tell you, it's really important. I shared this anecdote with some others recently. Our former school superintendent was riding around one of our neighborhoods over in East Knoxville, and over the weekend, I can't recall if it was Saturday or Sunday, and he saw a bunch of kids hanging around the school. Well, when you see kids hanging around school on Saturday or Sunday, there's some mischief going on. He stopped and went over and walked among them and found out they were doing their homework. They were having to steal the internet by standing outdoors of a locked school to be able to do their homework, which is ridiculous. I think that we do need to take some leadership in trying to get the internet providers to make sure that people have access to it in a city like ours. There's really no excuse in the 21st century for that not to be. So I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
And that was going to be my comment, is exactly what you said. Is the digital divide is real. It's real. As someone who works with youth in the community, who, as you think about higher education, you think about some of the things, everything now has to be done online, right? And if you don't have access, it is, we can say, oh, everybody, but seriously, there are students and there are families who don't have access to the internet. And so I echo your comments in terms of seeing what we can do to help make these opportunities possible. Think about, Drive 55, right? We want people to get credentials, particularly those who, there are opportunities that are not going to be butts in the seat, right? So how do you use distance edge and online education to help provide educational training opportunities for folks so that they can then contribute to the economic vitality of our communities?
Well,
So
Western Governors University, one of the parts of Drive 55 is all online.
Online.
And so some of the parts of our city where most people are who need to be brought up in the economic system have no access, we're basically just continuing what we've been doing in this country for so long, which is making the gap between the haves and the have-nots greater. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Following the adjournment of this meeting, the board will have a lunch session across the hall that is open for the public to observe. This meeting is now adjourned.